You want the baby boy's hole, you gotta pay the troll toll. You gotta pay the troll toll to get in.
Frank the Underestimated is part of an ancient demonic bloodline that was long ago cursed with the mortal sin of gluttony. All members of his bloodline share an insatiable hunger for food. That's okay though, because over the years they've learned to channel their hunger into something constructive, becoming skilled cooks and bakers that now wander the lands as demonic caterers to powerful nobles and mages. Hello everyone, I'm Marius, and that was my little intro to my new character which I made for the Daggerheart closed playtest, which I have become a part of. If you've been following this channel at all, you probably know that we're really into RPGs here, so I was super excited to become part of this playtest. And if you want to find out why Frank the Underestimated became an adventurer after his catering career, then keep watching the video, because what this is me talking about my experiences with creating a character in the closed beta. Probably as you're watching this, it's now the start of the open beta. We've been sitting on this video for a while. I was really excited to talk about this, but unfortunately, we had to sign an NDA and didn't get to talk about this at all. So now the gates are finally open. We can finally talk about this stuff. So out there by now, I'm sure there's plenty of videos going over the various rules and like explaining the nitty-gritty of the Daggerheart game. This is not one of those videos. I'm sure you can find great sources of information out there. What I want to do here is really just talk about my experience making this one character and probably go into some of my impressions of the game as they come up. I can say overall, I like Daggerheart. It seems like a cool game. I love its modularity above all. I mean, that was sort of what stuck out most. I do have to say that as part of the sort of beta test materials that they gave me, I did not see the entire game. It was mostly just character creation and only the lower level stuff as well. Really just the stuff I needed to make a character. The game wants you to start by picking a class and subclass. I deviated from this plan slightly because I like to come up with a character concept first. That's how I sort of do it in other RPGs, and I thought Daggerheart works quite well for this approach as well. And what that means to me particularly is that I want to find something that is mechanically interesting, and I want to find something that is sort of fictionally, narratively interesting. Right? I need both of those bases covered with just something. I don't need a very concrete plan. I'm not talking about some kind of massive Pathfinder-esque sort of character build, just something that piques my interest. One thing that stood out to me was the demon ancestry. I found this mechanically interesting because, as you may or may not know, in Daggerheart, the basic task resolution mechanic is, I think they call it the Duality Dice. Basically, you roll 2d12, and one of them's a hope die and another is a fear die. And whichever is higher, well, it means you have like either hope or fear. And at this point, I don't know exactly what that means, except that through the various abilities in the play materials, it became clear that, for instance, temporary effects like, oh, I don't know, sleep or being restrained or anything bad you might put on an NPC, the DM can remove that by spending fear. So that got me very interested because if you've been following this channel at all, if perhaps you have looked at our Baldur's Gate 3 playthrough, you may know that I am very much into playing control wizards or really control characters of any type. I love to basically shut down enemies and control the battlefield and basically ruin the DM's day in order to keep my guys alive. The demon's ability is that when you make a roll and it comes up fear, you can choose to not give the DM the fear, provided that you take one stress. And again, I have to say, all of these mechanics, what exactly is stress, what exactly is hope, what exactly is fear, I have no idea. But, I've seen a game or two. I've seen how resources generally work in RPGs, and I can make some reasonable assumptions, right? Stress, if you get enough of it, probably bad things will happen to you and you may become incapacitated and stuff. So that's, another thing to look out for from then on, right? Like, I'm pretty committed to this demon fear eating idea that shuts down that resource for the DM. The thing to look out for mechanically now would be to find some source to mitigate the stress, maybe heal myself, maybe some way to get rid of lots of stress during downtime, whatever. But I thought it would be fun if I could just deny this fear resource to the DM in the most intense and stressful way possible. So that's about half of my character concept. I have something mechanical that I'm excited about doing in the actual game. The question is, what is fictionally interesting, and how can we combine that very elegantly with this mechanical choice of being a demon? And so it's interesting. In Daggerheart, they just tell you you're a demon. There's not much like fluff text or anything, not at least none that I was given. And although I have all that sort of D&D stuff in my mind, where playing a demon really kind of makes you think of playing a tiefling in D&D, but they call it a different thing, and there's no reason to assume that we sort of have to stick to the tradition of D&D would be one way to put it. Another would be we can to say we can shed some of the baggage. However you want to look at it, it gave me a little bit more freedom, I felt, to interpret the whole demon thing any way I wanted. So I gave it a bit more of a Christian spin, and I thought, okay, what if there's like various demonic bloodlines that are all sort of aligned with some kind of mortal sin. And then I thought, and okay, this is a little bit out of left field, but bear with me. One thing that I think is not being considered enough when people make RPG characters and RPG character parties is the character outline. And I literally mean imagine sort of shadow cutouts of the silhouette of your party. Like, what does that look like? There's a reason why characters in Street Fighter look the way they look. I believe that Street Fighter characters were back in the day designed specifically to be instantly recognizable just by their outline. This is, for instance, why Chun-Li has those things in her hair and like the sort of iconic rings, around her wrists and stuff. Like, she's instantly recognizable, even if you just see a shadow of her. So I thought, okay, that's great for my demon character. I want him to have a very recognizable outline. So I made him small, fat, and with horns. And that was very satisfying to me. Kind of like a little demonic Danny DeVito with wizard powers. Yes, and thus I had something that I found fictionally interesting. Because, more specifically, it was interesting to me to sort of transform this mechanical fear-eating idea into something that has to do with literal eating, and hence the whole gluttony is part of this demonic bloodline angle was born. So, with my character concept now fully dialed in, I'm ready to actually follow Daggerheart's instructions to make a character, and the next thing I'm going to have to pick is a class. I'm pretty sure I want to play a wizard because I love playing wizards, and it fits the concept of my character mechanically very well, and I also think it fits fictionally. I already know he's just gonna call spells recipes, and he will talk about magical stuff as if, he's talking about cooking up an electrical storm or whatever, and, you can make that concept work very well for a wizard. What does it mean to be a wizard in Daggerheart? Well, there are two basic abilities that you get. Every wizard in Daggerheart gets to do prestidigitation, so minor magical tricks. We know this from D&D and stuff. And then also you get an ability called Arcane Patterns. And this one is very interesting. So what Arcane Patterns does is that you, the wizard, get to pick a number, any number, well, technically one between 1 and 12. And if that number comes up on one of the duality dice, those are the 2d12 with hope and fear and stuff. If it comes up, you can either take hope or you can clear a stress. And that's very interesting. So that means that the wizard just overall generates more hope. As far as I understand, any character that has hope come up on a roll generates one hope. And as a wizard, you have the chance to generate two, I guess, or clear stress, which, remember, synergizes very well with the demon ability of being able to deny fear as a trade for taking some stress. So already, this Frank guy it's all coming up Millhouse. Next up, I'm gonna have to pick a subclass. Looking over the materials, I found two wizard subclasses: the School of Knowledge and the School of War. Already just from the titles, I know which one I'm going to pick. I believe, I only gave it a once over. The School of War thing gives you more armor and other combat stuff. Not what I'm going for, so this one was a very obvious pick for me. With the School of Knowledge, what I get is sort of advantage on knowledge rolls, which is nice but not exciting to me, I have to admit. I just generally, this is not a Daggerheart thing. This is also sort of it was definitely a thing in D&D 5. I find knowledge rolls to just be boring. Just rolling, arcana or history or whatever just to see if my character can remember something is not exciting. It's not dramatic. I don't really need that in my game. I'm totally fine with the DM just telling me, this, or you have no idea. And maybe take into account if I've trained history or whatever. Other than that, I want to roll Arcana to do magical experiments. I want to roll history to convince the Duke that his family actually doesn't have a claim to the land. Stuff like that. Shit that's more dramatic and that can fail, and where I'm actually trying to influence stuff in the world. But okay, that's neither here nor there, because that's only one of the abilities the School of Knowledge gets. The other ability of the School of Knowledge, or rather the boon you get, is that at character creation, or whenever you take that, they call them foundations, by the way, the subclasses. Whenever you take that foundation, you get to choose two of your experiences and add +2 and +1 to either of them. And that's very interesting, except I haven't talked about experiences yet, and I don't quite know what they are yet. But I can sort of, I have an idea about it, and I'm going to spoil a little bit now by saying that you come up with experiences yourself, and you're supposed to collaborate with the DM about them, and they're sort of a little bit more free-form aspects of your character that you design yourself, both fictionally and mechanically, as I understand it. And I think they're supposed to have a real impact on the game. They've got numbers associated with them, so that usually tells you that they're going to be mechanically relevant, and that has me very excited. We'll get more into the experience a little bit later, but for now, the image I get of the wizard is one that I actually really like, because both of those extra abilities, at least the arcane patterns and this sort of fine-tuning of experiences, I feel is well designed for a wizard. And the reason for that is that I think people who want to sort of get into the nitty-gritty of the mechanics and who love being prepared for stuff that comes up in the game, and who sort of want to anticipate what's coming on, and generally, like to consider, if you want to be bombastic, you would say people who want to consider themselves as the architect of their own situation. Those people tend to play wizards. And I really appreciate that the Daggerheart rules kind of give you those kinds of abilities if you pick the wizard class, right? Like the the arcane patterns. It lets you pick a number that already feels sort of very scheming, almost mathematical. And then occasionally, if that comes up, you get extra resources. This whole designing your experiences. This is for players who really want to take charge of their play experience. And I really appreciate that. It's perfect for me, and it makes me excited to play the wizard. Next up in character creation is traits. So traits in Daggerheart seems to me to be what I would know from other game as stats. So you may know from D&D, strength, dexterity, constitution, etc. Daggerheart calls that traits, and they've also renamed those particular traits. So in Daggerheart we have strength, agility, finesse, knowledge, and presence. I think I got them all. And those sort of disseminate the space of shared attributes among adventurers a little bit differently than in D&D, and they're just different names. So people will have to get used to sort of different stats and different associations in their head. I'm totally neutral on this change. I think it's fine to have a little bit of fresh air and to sort of break open the ossified sort of assumptions we make about the different stats. One thing they also have done away with is just stat numbers. So associated with the traits are modifiers. So to specifically to make my character now, I have an array of modifiers of +2, +1, +1, +0, +0, and -1, which I get to distribute among these 5 traits. And I believe there are 5 anyway. So that's of course interesting to me because immediately my mind goes to no more rolling of stats, right? At least nothing in the materials that I've read indicated any possibility of rolling stats. And now with just, straight up modifiers, there's not this whole derivation step of first rolling 3d6 to get, that 3 to 18 range, and then to derive the stats, which is what I'm sort of used to. And I'm totally fine with this change, specifically because this doesn't seem like the type of game where rolling for stats is ultimately satisfying. I mean, I have to admit that, pretty much for all the D&D 5 sessions I've played, we usually opted to take the basic array anyway and didn't roll for stats. Even though my heart sort of still clings to this ancient custom of rolling for stats, and definitely in other games, like basic expert clones, stars without number, more OSR type games where character death is sort of more common and somewhat expected, and just where the whole game is sort of designed around more randomness, I would still advocate for rolling stats, and I'm still a big fan of that. But you need the right tool for the job, and just from my impression, this kind of randomness is not what Daggerheart is going for, and that's totally fine. And that being the case, it is the strong and correct choice, in my opinion, to kill the sacred cow of 3 to 18 stats, and just go for modifiers directly. So bold choices here. I'm totally fine with them. I don't have much to say about I keep calling them stats. I mean, the traits themselves. Whether I like the names or not is something that will have to be found out during play. I know this may seem like a totally cosmetic choice to call a trait knowledge versus intelligence and stuff, but I have found that in actual play that can make a big difference. Case in point, there's a sci-fi role-playing game which I like, Stars Without Number, and in I believe the original version of it, they had a skill called, I believe it was just persuasion or something similar. Don't nail me down on this. And then there was a revised version in which basically all of the skills were renamed from abstract fields of knowledge to verbs. So they renamed persuasion to talk. And that made it feel really weird to me because now suddenly as a DM, I have to go around and ask people to roll for talk. But talking isn't really, that's not a dramatic activity that you can fail, that doesn't really have an intention behind it. It's just a sort of mechanical feature of our bodies. Well, it's not quite. That would be more like phonetics or whatever. But it's a little bit too abstract just talking. And of course, that's a Stars Without Number example. That's a totally different game. But I'm just interested. I'm curious whether it'll feel very exciting to roll on knowledge, for instance. Right? It's because knowledge, just as an example, already implies more of a sort of education that's behind what you're rolling on, whereas intelligence feels to me more of an innate ability. But I don't know. I'm totally neutral on this. I think this is going to require a lot of play testing, and I'm sure then, after I've played around with this for a little bit, I'll have much more to say on how I like the traits. As far as Frank is concerned, I just went with what the sort of playtest materials were recommending. I believe I gave him +2 knowledge, which is the wizard stat. He also has +1 presence, which is what they renamed charisma to, and he has +1 finesse, which is sort of dexterity, I guess. And I believe I give him -1 agility because it fits. He's like, a little bit more on the heavy side and so isn't quite as agile and fast. And he has 0 strength. Next up is some mechanical stuff. They want me to determine my evasion. That I believe just starts at 8 for wizards. I don't know what that is yet. I'm expecting this is either some kind of natural armor class or it's sort of what they have for saving throws and stuff like that. It sounds like some kind of defensive stat, and it's not much more to say about that for now. And then they want you to note down the damage thresholds. Forgot what the numbers are now for Frank, but it's something like 8, 10, 13 for minor, medium, and severe. I might get the naming wrong here. But the point is there is some kind of damage threshold mechanic in the game. Again, they've left a lot of stuff in the playtest open, at least in the materials I got, and it's not completely clear how that's going to work. But I am actually extremely fascinated with this change. It might be, by the way, that this is common knowledge to people who've played Blades in the Dark. I don't actually know how damage thresholds work in that game. I know that Shadowrun has a similar mechanic. I'm not sure how that works there either. I believe it's also, it's varying quite a bit from version to version. It's just, I'm just noticing that that's if that's heavily featured in the mechanics, it'll be a strong move away from the Dungeons and Dragons-esque sort of straight up hit point mechanic, with the, to me, most impactful change being that taking damage might diminish your ability to fight, right? That's the big thing with hit points. It's a big pool of hit points. You're this huge bag of HP, and you can take as many hits as you like, and it doesn't matter until the last one that brings you below 0. And then you go from being a hero that's slaying ogres and dragons to someone who's laying on the ground bleeding out. And basically anything before that didn't matter. I say this now in a way that might make you think that I don't like that. That's not true. I think that's totally cool for sort of heroic play, or just, if you reframe the idea of hit points a little bit to, I don't know, fighting spirit or like narrative luck or whatever, we can basically imagine that whenever you just take hit point damage, well, the arrow didn't really hit you, it just grazed you, and, it was just a minor wound you've sustained. It's not real damage yet. So fictionally, I'm totally fine with it, mechanically as well for certain games. I just know that it can have the effect of making people a little bit more reckless and less, I don't even know, like maybe less tactical in their approach. Right? Because when you get diminished in your ability to fight by sustaining damage, it might make you fight more defensively or might make you prepare your sort of combat area a little bit more. But that's all, I'm speculating now. It's really just it'll have to be borne out in playtesting, but it's just something I'm super excited to try out and see how sort of heroic fantasy role playing, which I think is what Daggerheart is and wants to be, how that feels with damage thresholds. The one more thing I want to say about that is that the one system where I have actually played where damage thresholds are in effect is Burning Wheel, which I think is, like with many things, super hit and miss about it. The damage thresholds in that game feel great. It's actually sort of intuitive. Right? And just sustaining a superficial or a minor wound feels like it becomes a thing in the fiction, and I like that. It's sort of cool. The thing where Burning Wheel sort of goes off the deep end is in healing. Wounds work fine in that game, but healing is just sort of a pain, and in my opinion, not sort of a coherent thing in the rules. And it's just it was just always a pain to deal with. So that's the thing I would watch out for in Daggerheart. We have damage thresholds, but how does healing work? And just, again, speculating from the mechanics I've seen, hit points still seem to be a thing. I don't know how that interacts with damage thresholds. Again, many things are still sort of unclear to me, but this is something I'm really itching to try out, and I'm from what I've seen, I'm quite hopeful that this will be a non-painful version of damage thresholds. Next up is weapons, armor, and inventory. Actually, no, I kind of skipped hope, but that's not very interesting. Every character starts with 2 hope, and it's a pool. You have up to 5 hope, I guess. And from what I can tell, hope is a kind of resource which you can spend on a great variety of things, including spells and effects and so on. So moving on to inventory. I basically took what the game recommended me to take, which was a great staff. I just like that image, a little fat wizard with a big staff that pleases me. And honestly, weapons, this isn't the place where I would expect the wizard to shine. This is probably much more interesting for fighty characters like warriors and rogues and so on. And from what I understand, the system is like, there's a lot in there about the weapons that I like quite a bit. Daggerheart seems to have a system of primary and secondary weapons, and both of your choices matter. Like, you might have a dagger that you use as a secondary weapon, and it just gives you special abilities that dagger will only bestow upon you as a secondary weapon. So this is not like, in other games where you might run around with 2 weapons, but really your secondary weapon choice never really matters unless, the rare occasion where the DM takes your main weapon away or whatever, that never happens. So, they've sort of doubled down on it, this idea that your secondary weapon matters, and I like it a lot. For instance, a shield also counts as a secondary weapon choice that would take up that same slot and give you like +2 to armor and stuff. And that's really cool. I like this mechanic. Immediately gets my DM brain going, and I want to hack it and give people cool options for secondary weapons. But they've also done quite a bit of that. Like, I really enjoyed, there was one secondary weapon, the whip, that sort of, I guess you can crack your whip, and then the idea is you sort of scatter people into a further away area around you. I'm not sure how movement and areas work yet exactly, but that seems to be the intention behind the whip, and that kind of stuff gets me excited. It feels very creative. Then there's armor. The game recommended my wizard to start with a breastplate, which is fine, I guess. That's what you would I guess, do if you go into battle with goblins and stuff. Just strap a piece of metal to your chest so you don't get stabbed. Um, it appears to me that there is no mechanic that prevents you from spell casting when you're wearing armor. It might be wrong about that, but I'm fine with this, basically. It also, I was initially a bit shocked that the wizard gets to run around in a big breastplate, but then upon further inspection, it turns out they distinguish between just a breastplate and like full plate armor or like a 3/4 plate and yeah, all that stuff. This is for you medieval battle reenactors. Like I just know there's different degrees of breastplates, and I guess wizards get to wear the sort of lighter version of that. And I'm fine with that. How armor works exactly, I have no idea. Somehow I have 5 armor. Somehow there are armor slots, which you get to mark off when you take damage, from what I can gather. Some sort of more defensively inclined classes and ancestries get to extend those armor slots and so on. How that works exactly, I don't know. I need to read the combat chapter. A lot of questions will be cleared up then. But those are basically my weapon armor choices. On to inventory. This was, there wasn't much to it. I just get a handful of gold, I think. Okay, that gets me going about the whole gold mechanic, which also I only get to look basically at the character sheet, but it appears that they have moved away from gold coin sort of value systems. By what I mean by that is that you don't record on your character sheet the exact amount of gold coins you have. Rather, there are boxes you tick for like, handfuls of gold, treasures. I forget the exact phrasing. Again, they've sort of come up with cool terms for every little bit, and that's, I guess, something I'll have to learn over time. But the point is that we're dealing here with a sort of more abstract money system, which I will be very interested to see how that pans out. In my experience, with other games, particularly Burning Wheel, who have a more abstract gold or resource mechanic, this is great for DMs. Because as a DM, when you're planning an adventure or a dungeon or whatever, you no longer have to worry about, do I make this treasure now 400 gold coins or just 250? What kind of thing can they buy with that? Will that lead to inflation in the village they're, getting their stuff at? All that kind of stuff. Abstracting the money mechanic just makes it much easier for the DM to plan. But that's the DM side. It is also, unfortunately, my experience that players sort of hate this. It's the exact opposite. The player wants to know, do I get 250 gold or 500? I need to know. I need to envision the gold coins in my head. And the thing is, I kind of get it. As a player, like, there's just something to having concrete numbers to things. Then again, I ended up just giving out a lot of cash dice in Burning Wheel, which was a thing in that system, and players were also sort of into that. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe if Daggerheart comes with little sort of neat tokens for treasures and stuff, then people will buy into it more. I don't know. It's something that, I'm glad they're experimenting, glad they're trying it out, excited to see it in action. Apart from that, there's not much. I get to start with a healing potion or a stamina potion, which heals stress. That's cool. I took the stress potion because that fits the whole, draining fear theme. And then I get to sort of pick a spell book or some other kind of implement to cast spells, which is awesome. They give you some options like tarot cards and similar stuff if you want to be crazy. I took some liberties here and decided that Frank the Underestimated runs around with a sort of normal run-of-the-mill spell book, but that spell book has a big metal face on it, and the spell book will only open if that face is fed an entire onion each time. Yes. Next up is background questions. Every class in Daggerheart has about 3 questions associated with it that are, I guess, supposed to help you kind of flesh out the concept and come up with some dramatic hooks for the DM and so on. I like this a lot. It's cool. For the wizard, the specific questions where you have a rival, who is it? I'm sort of paraphrasing now. You have a rival, who is it? There's an object of great significance or a book that you're looking for. What is it, and why are you looking for it? And this one was my favorite. You have let your community down in some way. What were they relying on you for, and how did you let them down? And this is sort of perfect for Frank. So the way I went about it is I just sort of looked at the 3 questions and then came up with a scenario that I think might answer all 3 of them. And so one of the questions which they don't state explicitly, but which I always ask myself when I make characters, and what I ask my players if I'm DMing, is why did your character start adventuring, right? Usually in most RPGs, we are playing sort of characters that are aberrant in some way, that are abnormal, that don't fit into regular society. Normal people do not go into undead infested crypts to seek treasure. So that's what I also want to ask myself about Frank. And what I think what happened is that during one sort of splendid dinner party where Frank and his demon family were supposed to cook for, let's say, a powerful wizard, he was expected to prepare let's say, renowned turtle soup, for which he was expected to kill a living sort of imprisoned turtle person that was on the premises somewhere in the kitchen or whatever. And I think that Frank refused to do this. I think that he has a principle, which he probably articulated at that moment, that, I don't eat anything that can do calculus. And I also suspect that that turtle person it might also be like a wizard or like some kind of spellcaster or whatever, and who shares similar interests with Frank. And I think they became great friends, and Frank helped free him and then sort of ran away, thereby becoming exiled from his people and also incurring the wrath of the host that they were supposed to cook for. And this, in my mind, answers all 3 questions. Who is your rival? Well, that wizard. Let's call him Rotney, the great wizard of Rotney. And how did you let your people down? Well, you didn't cook the turtle person, and that was a big letdown. And now there's only the question left, okay, what kind of great artifact are you looking for? Okay, we might be able to take something that's not directly connected to this little turtle escapade. And what I came up with is that Frank is looking for the Red Book of Fasting, which is a sort of mythical artifact tome that is rumored to contain the cure for his, in his opinion, cursed people. Right? This book might be able to lift the demonic curse of gluttony that has afflicted his people, and he is probably secretly hoping that by acquiring this and returning to his people, he may be able to lift his exile status. Also in my mind, see, this is how my mind works. One of the sort of secrets about Frank, a thing that if I were to play Frank would come up later in the game when the DM starts mining Frank's backstory to like create a little mini adventure out of it. The thing that would be revealed is that probably all the other gluttonous demons are like super thin. Like they're not all fat. Like this is just something, they've learned to deal with it. And this is just something about Frank's character. He just has an eating disorder, perhaps, and it's not even part of the curse. And that might be an interesting thing to explore. I don't know. Anyway, I like the questions. Those are my answers. I found some of the other classes. I just got the impression that some of the questions might be a little bit more fleshed out. It also remains to be seen how this is always the problems. Like other RPGs have tried this as well to, put these kinds of narrative questions as part of the character creation. It always becomes this question of, okay, how is this relevant? Will this somehow be mechanized in the game, or is the player and is the DM going to completely ignore this kind of backstory? But I think it's good that it's there, and most of the questions are well designed. It certainly got me thinking more about Frank, so that was nice. Next up was probably my favorite part of character creation, and a thing that I'm, very excited to learn more about. That's experiences. You're supposed to design 2 experiences, taking everything we've talked about up till now into account: your ancestry, your community, your background questions, your character class, and so on. And now you're supposed to design 2 experiences, normally together with the DM. I now did it on my own, but that's fine. And those, they are associated with modifiers +2 and +1 for normal characters. As a wizard with the knowledge school, I can sort of boost that, but that's only particular to the wizard. And they've given some guidance on how to design these experiences, but in my opinion, this will have to be fleshed out quite a bit in the full book. I'm not going to repeat it here, but the gist of it, of what they're saying is, okay, don't make it too mechanical, but also don't make it too vague. Sort of find the middle path. So not like I'm a hard hitter or whatever. That might be too mechanical and not interesting enough. They don't provide rationale behind, why are you supposed to phrase them in a certain way, but I can make some reasonable assumptions, right? It's usually you'll get the most satisfying experience if you find that middle ground between very mechanical and very narrative focused. Kind of what I've been trying to do for this entire character creation. Yeah, I'm hoping for much more guidance in the full rulebook on how experiences are supposed to be created, and possibly also just a lot of examples would also help. And I would expect that how experience shapes out to actually work at the table is going to be very DM dependent. And I could see that some groups will give a lot of power to experiences, and that other groups might sort of ignore them a little bit. I'm not sure. That certainly will require a lot of playtesting, I think. As for the concrete experiences I chose, and again, I don't know exactly how they're going to actually work, but I assume you're going to add the modifier to some kind of role when it applies. So the experience I chose, the first one I called Stress Eater, because the idea is that this is just something that is part of the core of Frank the Underestimated and his being, that he has this innate hunger, and the way that it manifests in Frank in particular is to be a stress eater. When he gets stressed out, he starts eating. Now, here's already a problem with experiences that I've encountered, although this may be completely specific to me and my sort of role-playing game history. My problem is these remind me a lot of Burning Wheel traits. And not to make this too much about Burning Wheel, but in that game, during character creation, you actually spend points to buy yourself traits. And those traits, that's, could be anything similar perhaps to experiences. You might be able to, I don't know, see in the dark or be very tall. That might be a trait. And you have to pay some kind of currency for that. But the kind of game that Burning Wheel is, if you want to start the game with a character that has only one leg, right, is missing a leg, you have to buy that as a trait. That, even though that is ostensibly a disadvantage, character creation recognize that will make your character more interesting and, give more opportunities for drama and for advancement in that particular system. And therefore you have to pay, even though it's a negative thing. And now I'm kind of struggling with this now. With this question, okay, I want to create experiences with for my character, and I'm sort of intrigued by this idea of making them be kind of negative traits, like stress eating. Like for most people, that's a hindrance. That's something they don't want to admit to other people that they're doing. But then I wonder, okay, how, like, am I supposed to do this? Is it supposed to be just beneficial to my character? Or also, could I maybe create a sort of negative sounding experience, but then during play twist it to be something beneficial? For instance, with stress eating, this would be a conversation I would have to have with the DM. Can I convince the DM that Frank can just eat a full pack of donuts in order to heal himself of stress? Which, again, would factor into the whole I drain the DM's fear, produce stress, and then have many ways to get rid of stress. And you could do this in a way where, you make the player roll, I guess. You can have a stress eating roll, add the experience modifier, and then if the roll succeeds, you reduce your stress. And if it fails, well, the DM gets to impose some hilarious stomach problem on you, or like give you, various other problems. I could see that working out, but I don't know if that's the intention behind this whole system. And of course, it's dependent on the DM. It's just, this whole thing is super interesting to me because character creation kind of forces you to, even as a player, become kind of half a game designer and think about how this might work mechanically, whether it's overpowered or not. It's really cool. I want to see how that works out. My second experience, I call it Yes Chef. They actually sort of give you some guidance on how to name experience, and you could name them, with phrases or just, little names or even quotes. And I wanted to make this into a quote. And what I'm thinking of is the situation that Frank has often been in, sort of in the kitchen with his wandering demon cook family, clan, whatever, where they've probably become very good at cooking. But of course, in big kitchens, that requires not just sort of knowing recipes and having good instincts as a cook, but also being able to coordinate the various tasks in a kitchen. And so Frank has instilled in himself a great discipline. He's very good at taking orders, right? Yes, chef. But also I think that he could be very good at coordinating sort of any sort of orchestrated maneuver. I don't think he's very power hungry. Like, my intention with this experience was not to make some kind of leadership kind of trait. It's more, I guess, an alternative name for it would be kitchen discipline or something. He's just good at either following orders or orchestrating, some kind of coordinated, disciplined maneuver. And of course, me being the controlling wizard player that I am, it just, I think, would play into my playstyle of coming up with plans and then orchestrating. I love it when a plan comes together and all. And then, well, with that, I had two experiences, Stress Eater and Yes Chef. Felt good to me. I now get to sort of boost them with the School of Knowledge class, and I just decided to be balanced about that, and I can boost them both to +3, which feels rather strong. If you wanted as a wizard, you could have you could out of the gate start with an experience at +4. So I don't know, maybe a wizard will be the class you pick if you really want to hack the game with this whole experience mechanic. I don't know. But I was quite satisfied with these. Next up in character creation is name and pronouns. That's easy. I'm playing Frank the Underestimated. That's his name. That's what he's known by. And it's a he, him. And I'm already crafting scenarios where, you know, I'm wondering where does the underestimated come from? And I suppose that Frank goes around and for a laugh asks people to guess his weight, and then he will inevitably say, "Oh, you have underestimated me." Next up is the domain cards, and I suspect that most people will spend most of the time in character creation on this choice. This is where you sort of do the most sort of mechanical kit designing for your character. So the way this works in Daggerheart is that each class has two domains associated with the class. For instance, with the wizard, this is Codex and Splendor. Those are just names for two domains. And if you then look in the book at Codex, that just has sort of different little spell books. For instance, the Book of Iliad, I think the Book of Eva or something was another one. And each of these books then have 3 spells. I, for instance, decided to take the Book of Iliad, which gives me sleep, telepathy, and magic missile. And I suppose these are just spells I can now cast as a wizard. I really like this. I like this packaging. This feels very wizardy. This wasn't a very tough choice at all. I like the other books as well. Some of them might give you more sort of AoE damage options, something like Burning Hands and stuff. I do enjoy quite a bit that these are packaged. You know, you can't just, like in other D&D versions, you would pick individual spells to start out with. I think that this way of doing it, of bundling them, makes it easier for new players to sort of more quickly reach a loadout. And I think also for designers, it frees up some interesting design space, because now you can't just combine every spell with every other spell, right? You can't just pick the 3 strongest spells. If you want sleep, which is usually for control-oriented people a pretty strong spell, at least at lower levels, now you also have to take telepathy, which, depending on the table you're playing at, might be a completely useless spell or might be super important if the DM is a hard ass about that kind of stuff, doing metagame communication and so on. But that's only one domain. I could, as far as I understand, now also pick the other card, right? This whole spell book of Iliad, which I picked, is now one card that I get to sit at the table with and have available. I could also pick another codex, but for what I had in mind, picking a Splendor card was actually pretty great. Splendor is also, that's a domain that's shared with the Cleric, or as they call it, the Seraph class, and that has, as you might expect, all the sort of healing and sort of support options, which I found very interesting. Straight from the get-go, wizards can actually heal if they want, which I'm totally cool with. Like, if you're gonna be a magic user anyway, why not just throw that in together? We don't have to stick to the old ways of doing things. And especially for Frank, the stress-eating demon, this is perfect because there's an ability, I think it's called Mending Hands or something, and that lets you spend hope to either heal or reduce stress in yourself or other people. That's perfect. So I took that and the Book of Iliad, and that's pretty much my loadout. I was quite happy about this. I have no idea how cards might look at higher levels. I'm excited to see that in the full version of the game. This just wasn't part of the playtest materials I got. It was all just level 1 stuff. But with the level 1 stuff that I saw, I would say there was nothing that stood out to me as bad in any way, and there also wasn't anything that was like super surprising. It's kind of what you would expect if you wanted to adapt D&D to a more modular sort of system, with some, okay, I do have to correct it a little bit. There are some abilities in there that please me greatly. I love that stuff. I think there was one domain card called Wordsmith, which I think you're supposed to use for like bard type characters, and that lets you sort of get, I think I'm messing this up now, but it's something like this. You get a bonus for rolls where have a social interaction, and you as the player manage to rhyme a phrase or whatever, and only then do you get the bonus. That kind of stuff I love, right? Where it like sort of breaks out of the narrow confines of the game mechanics and has sort of free interaction with the more poetry or ephemeral layer of stuff we say at the table. There are other cards that give you sort of narrative options, like, oh, I know a contact in this town or whatever. That kind of stuff isn't necessarily seen in the more mechanically oriented versions of D&D, and I enjoy it quite a bit. That breaks the mold a little bit. Other than that, it's all just level 1 stuff. I'm totally okay with having that not be crazy and giving people sort of something they are familiar with. But it does make me curious about what are the options at higher levels. I want to see those level 9 wizard spells and that kind of stuff. Gets me excited. So that's it. That's Frank the Underestimated, level 1 demon wizard. I'd be excited to play Frank. I quite enjoyed the Daggerheart character creation. I think this has a lot of promise, and I absolutely want to try it out. To sort of wrap this up and put a ribbon on it, I do want to say, and this may be potentially controversial, but one of the reasons, after studying the playtest materials and seeing, that was the thing that stood out to me most, seeing how incredibly modular the design is of Daggerheart, it got me excited for a very specific reason, and that is, and I know some people won't like this, but what I sort of see Daggerheart being is a kind of spiritual successor, you might say, or like a second attempt, or a sort of vindication of D&D 4th edition. There, I said it. Simply because D&D 4th edition, while sort of cursed for a variety of reasons that I will not go into, was, in my opinion, a very well-designed game. It was, it was not quite what people wanted back in the day, coming off of an ossified 3rd edition, and it sort of killed too many sacred cows of D&D, in my opinion, to the point where it was no longer recognizable. But if you took it as its own game, it was actually quite well designed and made some, did some really cool stuff, most of which was, I think, an incredibly modular design, right? And this whole domain card thing, this is extremely reminiscent of how you would put together a 4th edition character, including classes in Daggerheart having 2 domains to choose from. I believe I'm messing this up as well. It's been super long since I looked at 4th edition, but from what I remember, each class had sort of a power source, and you could, like, this might be something like arcane or like divine or whatever, and you could freely match your sort of martial abilities with this sort of magical power source. I'm messing it up, but the point is, it was extremely modular and you could sort of plug things together. And I think even the people at Wizards making 5th edition sort of realized that this is inherently a kind of good, flexible design. There's just a lot of fun stuff to do with this for both designers and players who are putting together character builds. And that is why you may not realize this, but you can still see the vestigial elements of 4th edition in D&D 5, namely in the form of the Warlock. You may have noticed that the design of the Warlock character class feels overall intuitively a little bit different from the other classes, and that the reason for that, I believe, is that they've just transplanted the 4th edition design ethos into 5th edition, except only for the Warlock, right? The Warlock gets to choose specific invocations, and the Warlock player can sort of, you have to make some kind of pack choice in the beginning. I, by the way, never play Warlock. I'm not a big fan of that class, but from what I remember, you choose a pact, and then within that pact, you get to mix and match different invocations. And, even though I don't play it, I also think it's kind of a good design. And it seems to me that the Daggerheart design just has taken this sort of 4th edition warlock ethos and applied it to every class. And I suspect that, as opposed to what happened with 4th edition, times might be ready for this. That's it. That's my sort of grand retelling of character creation during the Daggerheart beta test. Leave some comments below. Tell me what you think of Frank, and tell me what your experience was making Daggerheart characters. That's it. See you soon.